Hey all, it's KR King of D&D Homebrew, and today I'm going to give you some tips on how to make your encounters interesting such that they're always not just, let's roll initiative, let's have a battle. And to do this, I'm going to cover four, I think, key elements to creating interesting encounters. The first is always to remember that the player's actions initiate the encounters. The process of their players exploring your world, traveling into different areas, making decisions about where they're going to go, what they're going to do, is what provokes the reaction. The second is, what is, the NPCs or creatures or whatever it is, the material of an encounter, as we'll see, its own reaction to the player's activities, right? How they react can create an encounter that's much more interesting than just they attack, or if the players just attack. The third thing is to think about encounters in a broader context than just, here's a group of monsters, let's see what happens. Like using wandering monster tables, and it just shows you different creatures and numbers and based on, challenge rating or whatever system you're using. There's different, ways to think about when the players encounter something through their activities, and a reaction might be something different than just, monsters seeing people and attacking or fleeing or something else. And then the final thing is think about the emotional import of an encounter in terms of gameplay, in terms of your players confronting some encounter in your world and what that means and how you can, use that emotion, the sort of expectations, the anticipation, the wonderment to your advantage. Now, an important point here is that combat, has always played an important role, certainly any editions of Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or a lot of other RPG systems. If you think about players, creating characters and leveling them up and getting new abilities, a lot of this is measured in terms of opposing, other NPCs or monsters or whatever in a battle type situation. So you're not going to get rid of this altogether. I'm not even saying it's bad. It's just that thing where you realize as a player or GM, oh, here we are in another battle. We've all kind of seen this a million times before. And you know how it can go, however long it takes, you only have so much game time and that kind of thing. And a lot of times the players have either, maybe there's a ticking clock where they really do have to go somewhere and get something and go here. And if they're running into encounters that they are initiating by going into this area that's known for encounters, it can slow down the game. Or they're just interested. Even if it's not a ticking clock, the players are interested in something in your world. They want to go here, they want to go there. And we get bogged down in encounters that always lead to roll for initiative, let's have a battle. Maybe you're going to take care of it quickly. Maybe the other side is going to run away or whatever, but maybe not. And we're taking up time. And the thing is, it can be a lot more interesting. All right, so as I said, my first principle always in designing encounters or thinking about them or running them is, why is this encounter happening? Which really means, what did the players do to initiate an encounter response, right? And because the players are always driving the action. The players are always, the antagonist, protagonist of the story, however you want to put it. And so some activity they're making, typically exploring the world, whether it's wandering the wilderness or delving into a dungeon or the becks, alleys of some city, they're running into something or initiating contact with something such that there is an encounter. So let's say the players are traveling through your world. They're going from one city to another, and they're going across an area known to be a place where there's all sorts of monsters and encounter possibilities. So they're going to potentially expect this to happen. But, if we unpack that a little bit, why is an area known to be, a dangerous place filled with monsters? Well, typically it's uncivilized. And it's uncivilized because why? Difficult terrain, jungle or swamp or desert or something where it's, inhospitable, doesn't have access to a navigable water source. A lot of settlements are built in on rivers or along oceans. And if it doesn't have these things, it becomes lonely, out of the way. And this is where all sorts of monsters and, things that want to be left alone can congregate and not be bothered. Because when you have a city settlement or whatever, the forces of order there, when people all collect themselves, are going to push things away because they don't want them harassing them. All right, so the players are going into this area that they know we could have encounters here. You can either use set encounters that you've created, or you can use random monster charts, that just usually split by terrain type to just generate something as they travel through. And this came from, in the origins of D&D, these random monster charts, because you had homebrewed worlds. You didn't have campaign settings or adventure paths. Everybody just had to kind of make things up. And it was assumed, well, if you travel across these areas, there's a chance you could run into something. Because, again, you're out in the wilderness or down in a dungeon or whatever. Because the notion from the beginning was that the world is a dangerous place. And so the idea was you could use these randomizing charts based on the area of the wilderness or the level of a dungeon to quickly generate a random encounter. But again, I always prefer to have some kind of encounters set up in advance just so that I can tie them into my storyline if I want to, but so that I can also kind of use the principles that I'm talking about here in encounter design to make them more interesting than just, here's, 2 mana cores, let's have a battle. So back to our initial idea of the players are traveling through a sparsely settled, difficult terrain area between 2 cities that's known to be a place where monsters dwell. They've initiated this, but then when you're generating the encounter, what is it, the NPCs, the monsters, the reaction they have, why are they reacting to the players? You can just say, well, I'm going to roll a die, 1 out of 6, about 17% chance they run into something. I've got these set encounters, and here we go. Well, that lends itself a little to the battle situation, right? But you want to think about, well, why is it that this encounter is occurring? Why are the monsters reacting to this? Oftentimes what you find, let's say you've got a trail that goes through difficult terrain. Well, creatures may hang out here knowing that food source or treasure sources go along this trail. Same thing with a water source. If you've got, really dry, barren hills or desert or whatever, and there's an oasis, things are going to hang out there knowing that creatures are going to come to feed on this water. And once you have this justification for creatures to be here, you can then determine a reaction that's different or more interesting than just they attack. So if there's a shared water source, oftentimes there will be sort of an unspoken truce with creatures up to a point about sharing the water source and not constantly fighting over it. Because eventually, no matter who you are, if everyone else gets together, they're going to push you away. You're not going to be able to just rule it and say no one else gets this water but me. So there is this uneasy truce at a water source. And when the players come and see this, again, you may have to educate players on this because they may be, especially, when I've seen with newer players sometimes, they think everything is just attack. And they go by this water source and they're like, oh, I guess we have to fight this. So what you can do here is set up an encounter at this water source that's really deadly, right? The players can't win. And maybe they run away or, maybe they attack, but maybe they realize that these creatures are here sharing this water. There's other creatures here and whatever, and there's some kind of truce going on. And of course, in the world of D&D, you have sentient monsters, creatures that can communicate. You have players with the ability, very limited though, to communicate with animals. And so suddenly, instead of saying, we're just going to fight these lions at the water hole and they're just animals or whatever, you have an opportunity to communicate with them, or at least not waste your time fighting a battle like this. And there's all sorts of possibilities you can think about what these animals, which again are on this neutral terrain, like dogs at a dog park or something, and you can communicate, find out stuff about this area, things that are more interesting for the players to explore, to provoke a reaction than some animal encounter. So if you have a trail that goes through difficult terrain, you can have a bandit camp nearby and then vantage points where they can watch, see who's coming down the trail, decide whether they want to attack or not, or decide whether they want to send an advance group onto the trail with archers up above ready to go and demand a toll. Well, they inform the players that, hey, this is what we're doing. We've got these archers up here. Now the players, again, may just decide we always attack, and you can set this up in such a way that these bandits really have an advantage. Don't necessarily want to go to a TPK. They may just take the players hostage. The players could run away. Again, if you've lost some people, you got to think about this. But what you're trying to do is promote the idea that if they've got you outnumbered, you may have to negotiate. You may have to bluster yourself, intimidation, this sort of thing, depending on the system you are working with. But it isn't just, you don't want to fight them. Another thing you can do with, let's say, bandits, again, on this road, the players are traveling between towns, maybe they recognize someone within the party. Or maybe they know something. If the players mention some person, so-and-so has sent us on this mission, maybe that's enough to either intimidate them or say, listen, you have to pay us this amount, or again, the players bluff or whatever. Maybe they give them some information, things they've heard about this for a price. But it's not just the bandits appear, you fight them, let's play for, 45 minutes in this battle. It's something more interesting. The players have provoked the bandits by going through on this road. The bandits have a reaction, and now what do the players do? They don't necessarily, if they're super outnumbered, want to have a fight here. Now, I like to always have encounters, random encounters that are just percentage-based, still set up so that I can connect them to storylines or have a sense of what's going to happen. I don't have to necessarily improvise, but sometimes you do run out, and you can just roll. Let's say they're going through some area, and you say 1 out of 6, which is, as I said, 17% chance. That's how it used to be in the old days, although there were hexes that were 50-50. You can make it whatever percentage you want, but what I would suggest is if you don't have something set up, they're going through difficult terrain, I would make that roll. And I would potentially use a random monster chart here if you have to. And the thing is, this is kind of keeping the game honest. Because you're presenting this area as dangerous. And if you start to say, it's just like fudging rolls in combat. You're sort of fudging this roll. Now, maybe if you're thinking to yourself, they're on a ticking clock, we're in a hurry, we don't have that much game time, I don't want to run some encounter. That's okay. But as we'll see, if you can think of some creative, let's roll initiative encounters, you can have those and they don't take as much time. But you're not fudging things such that the players realize, when we go through this hex, if we're in a hurry, they won't roll for random monsters. We won't run into anything because we don't have time, right? There's always a potential here for something. If they're going to do this, they have to take that risk. You can make it whatever percentage you want, but I just think it's important to, as I say, keep your game honest in this way. And this is where my third category about thinking about non-traditional encounters really comes into play. So the players are going through some terrain that is notorious for being desolate, strange creatures, strange things that they see, events and stuff. So let's say it's a real-life ghost forest, which is a forest in which the brackish seawater has come up, killed off the trees, and so now there are all these white husks and whatnot. It's a creepy place. No one lives there. It's, you can't grow anything or whatever, but for whatever reason they have to travel through here. They know it's deadly. It's a shortcut or something. And they're coming along and they see in the distance a spire. And they come upon the spire and they see that it's an obelisk standing there. And they get closer and it's covered in moss and lichen. And underneath this moss and lichen, if it's scraped away, they see runes in a language unknown. And then if they translate the runes, whether it's lore checks or spells, comprehend languages, whatever it is in your system, and it says, here at this spot, Prince X won the battle of Y. And it just commemorates. And the players investigate this. There's nothing magical here. There's no hidden entrances in the ground to some dungeon complex. There's no underground thing for a treasure, anything like that. It's just this information that this occurred at this spot, now long been flooded out. No one lives here. Some long lost civilization. And you can connect this if you want to a storyline, but what I'm saying is you can just have this as a strange encounter because it does, as I said, first the players initiate by going here, then the encounter reacts by giving them this information. If they approach, touch the thing to scrape the moss away and everything, maybe with a mage hand or some distant spell, then figure out how to translate the runes. So then it gives them this information. And as I said, it can relate to a storyline. I probably would make it to relate to some story, although I may not have it prepared yet. I may just have a series of these kind of informational things. It can be things like you go through some area and there's mysterious lights in the air. The players may think, oh, it's will-o-wisps or something, but it doesn't have to be. Some gas, something. They can hear strange noises. They can hear a chanting that comes from nowhere, and that's it. That's all it is. It can relate to something that they have to figure out eventually. They're moving to some other city. They don't. Once they figure, well, we can't figure this out yet, they're going to keep going. But they're going to write that one down. They're gonna know about the obelisk and this Prince X and this Battle Y, these names, right, and try to connect them. But this comes to the fourth category. This is why these kind of out of the box, unique encounters like this are really interesting. Is the emotional import that's contained in any encounter. Because when the players spot the obelisk in the distance, they go into collective attention mode. Right? Something is happening here, right? The GM has created this thing. What is going on? What is happening? And really what it is as we approach this thing, are we going to go into initiative mode? So they approach the obelisk cautiously. They're looking in all directions as they see something. Then they see that it's covered up. They've got to use, like I said, a mage hand and scrape this. Is something going to happen when even the mage hand touches it? If they read this thing, if they read it out loud, is something going to happen? There is this collective emotional reaction to this. And this is not just something of interest. In a world where long dead creatures can still walk the material plane, are they going to appear at any moment when the players are interacting with this object? And I think of two of the most famous encounters from Lord of the Rings, one of the great source books of D&D, Paths of the Dead, in which Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas go into this cave complex and they meet all the ghosts of these dead soldiers who broke their oath. And basically there is enough to just annihilate them, but it's an encounter where Aragorn, as the true king, has this bargain that he makes, fulfill your oath and we'll go on. But it isn't a roll initiative, I'm going to kill a bunch of these guys or whatever. He kind of uses a lore check or skill or persuasion or whatever. Maybe it's a magic item. He has a sword. But the point is, it's not that, that it's a totally scary, totally, flavorful encounter, lots of very threatening, but it doesn't go in that direction. And then you also have the Marsh of the Dead, where they're crossing this famous battle. Frodo and Sam and Gollum are traveling through, and Gollum says, don't look into the water. And, Frodo looks down, and one of these things comes to life. He falls into the water, and he looks like he's going to be annihilated. And then I think it's Gollum and Sam pull him back out. And once he's out, the creatures have no power. They can't leave the water. They can't beam out, but they, once he's broken the spell, and Gollum repeats, don't look at them, right? That's their power. So it's a super scary, super threatening encounter, but it's done in such a way, the players go to this area, they have the encounter, the creatures react, but then it's resolved in a different manner than roll initiative and let's have a fight. And it adds flavor. There's a history to both of these situations. And the first one, the Paths of the Dead, they help, basically win the big battle. And in the other one, it's just, whoa, that was threatening. But as long as we don't do X, we've learned something there. And we don't have to roll it all out necessarily and defeat it. And this is thinking of encounters, like I say, out of the box a little bit. What is their reaction going to be? And the emotional import of both of these is heavy, and just as it is with potentially this, especially if you really detail the battle that occurred with the obelisks, right? That you have these details of this. It gives your world flavor, but it's not necessarily something that has to be rolled out. So you remember those four principles that we said, the players initiated, what's the NPC's reaction? How can you think of things that are out of the box? And then always remember that every encounter has an emotional import, and it'll really improve your world. So hopefully that helps you. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, always looking for more, leave some comments on encounter design that you've experienced. Most importantly, my friends, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.